My name is Caroline Ashworth. I am 43 years old. And on the night of September the 14th, at exactly 7 minutes past 8 in the evening, I sat at a round table covered in white linen inside the grand ballroom of the Ridgemont Country Club in Scottsdale, Arizona, while my husband of 16 years stood at a podium 10 feet away, adjusted his microphone and looked out over 230 guests, investors, board members, business partners, family friends, and said the following words: "Everything you see tonight, everything this company has become, is the result of one man's vision." He smiled that wide, practiced smile. I had watched him rehearse in our bathroom mirror on mornings when he thought I was still asleep. Hartwell Consulting Group didn't grow because of luck. It grew because I built it, brick by brick, from the ground up. Applause. Genuine warm applause. 230 people clapping for a man who had, at that exact moment, not one brick in that building he could honestly call his own. I sat with my hands folded in my lap. My champagne glass was full. I had not touched it. Our daughter, Lily, 6 years old, sat in the chair to my left in a white dress with eyelet trim that I had pressed that morning at 6:45 while she was still asleep. She leaned toward me during the applause and pressed her small mouth against my ear. "Mommy," she whispered, "Daddy told me to tell you something." I turned to look at her. Her brown eyes were wide and serious, the way children's eyes get when they are carrying a message they don't fully understand. "He said to tell you that you're nobody, that tonight is his night, and you're just here because it would look weird if you weren't." I didn't cry. I didn't flinch. I didn't reach for that champagne glass. I looked at my daughter's innocent face, at the confusion and the slight apology in her eyes, because even at 6 she could feel the weight of what she had just been made to deliver. And I thought about the folder sitting in my evening bag, placed there that afternoon with quiet and deliberate hands. The folder with the articles of incorporation. The folder with my name at the top of every page. What they didn't know was that Hartwell Consulting Group did not belong to my husband. It had never belonged to my husband. Every dollar, every contract, every client relationship in that room had been built by me, and the paperwork had always agreed. This is that story. I met Davis Hartwell in the spring of 2004 at an accounting conference in Denver, Colorado. I was 21 years old, freshly graduated from the University of Colorado with a business degree and a minor in finance, working as a junior analyst for a mid-sized advisory firm called Sterling Partners on the 16th floor of a glass building on 17th Street. Davis was 27, charming, 6 feet tall, with the kind of easy confidence that fills a room without demanding it. He told jokes that landed. He remembered names. He had a handshake that made people feel trusted. He ordered his steak rare and his bourbon neat, and he held a conversation the way a good politician holds a crowd. Warm eye contact, attentive nodding, a laugh that arrived exactly when it was needed. What Davis did not have, which I would not understand for several years, was any particular aptitude for the actual work of building a business. He was extraordinary at the front door of a deal. He was disastrous at everything behind it. We dated for 2 years. He was attentive and affectionate in those early years in ways that seemed genuine, and perhaps they were. We married in June of 2006 in a small ceremony in Boulder. My parents were there. His parents were there. 42 guests, a garden reception, a violinist who played something gentle while we cut the cake. My mother cried. His father gave a toast that was mostly about Davis. I was 23. I believed in the marriage, the way you believe in things when you are 23 and the sun is bright and your dress is beautiful and someone is looking at you like you are the best thing they have ever seen. By 2007, Davis had left 3 different firms. He left the first because he didn't respect the senior partners. He left the second because the culture was, he said, toxic. He left the third because the firm was too small-minded for his ideas. After the third departure, I sat down with him at the kitchen table of our apartment in Phoenix and asked him a direct question. What do you actually want to do? He leaned back, stretched his arms over his head and said, I want to run my own firm. I want to build something. I looked at him for a long moment. Then I said, Okay, tell me your plan. He opened his mouth. He described a vision. It was vivid and expansive and entirely short on structure, legal framework, financial modeling, or a single named client. It was a painting of a building with no foundation underneath it. I listened to the whole thing. Then I said, "Leave it with me." I spent the next 11 weeks doing what Davis could not do. I drafted the business plan. I researched the Arizona market for independent consulting firms. I identified the 3 primary service gaps in the Phoenix metropolitan area where a lean expert firm could enter and capture market share within 18 months. I modeled the first 3 years of projected revenue across 4 different growth scenarios. I contacted an attorney friend from college named Patricia Shen and asked her about the cost of incorporation. I researched the difference between an LLC and an S corporation and made the recommendation. I set up the initial bookkeeping structure. I built the firm's website myself over a weekend in January, learning the platform as I went, troubleshooting the contact form at 2 in the morning while Davis slept. I registered the domain, and on the afternoon of March the 14th, 2008, I sat across from Patricia in her office on East Camelback Road in Phoenix, and I signed the articles of incorporation for what would become Hartwell Consulting Group. My name was on those documents, not Davis's, mine, because it was my business plan, my research, my savings. $11,400 of my own money from an account I had been quietly growing since my first paycheck at 21, that seeded the initial operating costs. Davis's name went on the door, the business cards, the email signatures. That was the arrangement we discussed at the kitchen table the week before incorporation. He would be the face. I would be the engine. He was better at rooms full of people. I was better at the work behind them. At the time, I believed this was a partnership between equals with different strengths. I did not yet understand that Davis saw it differently, that in his version of this story, the face was the story, and the engine was furniture. The first indication came at a dinner party in October of 2009. We had recently signed our 3rd significant client, a regional healthcare provider based in Tempe called Southwestern Medical Partners. It was a contract worth $280,000 over 24 months. I had spent 4 months cultivating that relationship, preparing proposals, revising our service model to fit their specific compliance needs. I had driven to their offices on a Tuesday morning in August and sat across from their CFO, a quiet, sharp woman named Angela Brewster, and answered every question she had for 90 minutes without a single note in front of me. I had gone home that evening and revised 3 sections of the proposal based on exactly what she had said. I had sent a follow-up letter with 2 additional data sets she mentioned wanting. I had attended 2 further meetings without Davis before the contract was signed. Davis had come to the signing lunch. He had shaken Angela's hand, told a joke about golf, and ordered the salmon. At the dinner party that October, a colleague of Davis's named Paul Whitmore raised his glass and said, "To Davis, who just landed Southwestern Medical, that man could sell sand in a desert." Davis raised his glass back, laughed his easy laugh, and said, "You'd be amazed what a little charm can accomplish." I was standing 2 feet away. Angela Brewster had never met Paul Whitmore. She had spent 4 months deciding to trust me. I said nothing. I sipped my wine. I filed the moment carefully in the back of my mind where I kept all the other moments. By 2009, that collection was already considerable. The second indication came from an unexpected direction. In the summer of 2012, we brought on our first full-time employee, a junior analyst named Marcus Webb, 24 years old and freshly minted from Arizona State. Marcus was sharp. He caught on quickly. By his 3rd month, he had come to understand the organizational architecture of the firm well enough to recognize where the actual work was being generated. He came to me one Thursday morning at 8:50 with a question about a client report. We worked through it together for 40 minutes at the small conference table in my office. At the end, he said, "Can I ask you something?" I told him yes. He looked slightly uncomfortable. "Is it true what Davis said, that he started this company with money from his grandfather's estate?" I set down my pen. I looked at Marcus for a moment. Then I said, The company was built with a combination of resources. Now, let's talk about the second section of that report. Marcus nodded. He never asked again, but I watched his face shift slightly in those 40 minutes. The way a person's face shifts when a picture they have been looking at resolves suddenly into a different image than the one they thought they were seeing. The third indication was the one that changed the temperature of everything permanently. In January of 2016, Davis and I attended a holiday dinner for the Arizona Business Leadership Council. Davis had been elected to the board the previous spring. At the dinner, he was introduced by the outgoing board chair, a silver-haired real estate developer named Clarence Buford, who described Davis as the visionary architect of one of Arizona's fastest-growing independent consulting firms. Davis took the podium. He spoke for 6 minutes. He described the founding of Hartwell Consulting Group in specific detail. He described the early days, the sleepless nights, the difficult decisions, the strategic pivots. Every single thing he described was something I had done. Not embellished, not reframed, not credited to we. He used the word I 14 times. I counted. I was sitting at table 7 with a glass of sparkling water in my hand, and I counted every single one. He laughed. I counted. I did not move. I did not change my expression. I sat perfectly still and I decided something. The decision was not dramatic. It was not emotional. It was quiet and clean and final, the way certain decisions are when you have been allowing something to accumulate long enough that it reaches its natural conclusion. I was done being furniture. And I was not going to announce it. I was going to do something far more permanent. I was going to build the exit quietly, and I was going to let the documents do the talking when the time came. The process began on a Monday morning in February of 2016. I had taken Lily to preschool at 7:55 and drove directly from school to the office of Patricia Shen. I sat down across from her and I said, "I need you to help me understand exactly what my legal position is." Patricia had seen the articles of incorporation 8 years earlier. She knew the structure. She said, "You've always been the majority owner, Caroline. You own 54% of Hartwell Consulting Group. Davis owns 46%. I said, "I know. What I need to know is what protections exist if I needed to exercise that ownership fully." Patricia looked at me for a long moment. "Are you thinking about dissolution?" "Not yet," I said. "I'm thinking about a complete structural audit. Every contract, every client file, every change to the operating agreement since 2008. She wrote 3 things on a notepad. Then she looked up. "Give me 2 weeks. What she found was both reassuring and illuminating. The core structure was intact. My name was still on the founding documents. My ownership was still correctly recorded with the Arizona Corporation Commission. But Davis had, over the previous 4 years, been representing himself in client correspondence as the sole principal of the firm. His email signature read, Davis Hartwell, founder and principal. Mine read, Caroline Hartwell, director of operations. He had drafted that distinction himself in 2012, and I had not caught it until Patricia laid the printed emails side by side on her conference table and let me look at them in silence. I looked at them for a long time. Then I said, "What do I need to do?" Patricia said, "First, we document everything. Then we restructure the operating agreement to make your position explicit and unambiguous. Then we wait for the right moment." I said, "I am a patient person." March the 3rd, 2016. I stayed late at the office after Davis left for dinner with his college friends. I went through every client file, cross-referenced every contract, pulled 3 years of financial statements. I did it quietly and methodically over 3 hours and 40 minutes. And when I was done, I drove to a UPS store on North Scottsdale Road and had everything scanned to a secure cloud drive that only Patricia and I could access. The drive was named because I have always found small private ironies sustaining foundation. April through June of 2016 was what I think of now as the rearrangement period. I began making small, deliberate adjustments to my positioning within the business. I started signing my own name on client correspondence where previously I had allowed Davis's signature to appear on things I had drafted entirely. I introduced myself at meetings not as Davis's wife, but as Caroline Ashworth, co-founder of Hartwell Consulting Group. I had my business cards reprinted at a shop on Indian School Road. They said, Caroline Ashworth, co-founder and managing principal. Davis noticed the new cards. He held one up one afternoon and said, "Managing principal is a bit of a stretch, don't you think?" I said, "Patricia Shen reviewed my title last month in relation to the operating agreement. It's accurate." He set the card down. He did not pursue it. This was one of Davis's consistent patterns. He retreated from direct confrontation as quickly as he had initiated indirect undermining. He preferred the slow erosion of someone's position over open conflict. Now that I was no longer eroding, he didn't quite know what to do. The Meridian Capital opportunity arrived in July of 2016 through our firm's website contact form. A private equity firm based in Phoenix seeking a long-term consulting partner for portfolio management advisory work. Projected contract value, $1,200,000 over 36 months. The largest opportunity we had ever received. Davis was in Sedona that week for a golf retreat. I responded to the inquiry that same afternoon. I set up the introductory meeting. I drove to their offices on East Missouri Avenue on the 15th of July at 10 in the morning and met with their managing director, Sandra Kowalski, for 2 hours and 17 minutes. I presented our track record, our service model, our retention data, and a preliminary framework for a portfolio advisory engagement. Sandra asked sharp questions. I answered every one. At the end, she shook my hand and said, "We'd like to move to a proposal stage. Who else will be involved on your end?" I said, "I'll be your primary contact throughout. I'm the managing principal." She nodded. "Good. I prefer to know who I'm actually working with." The Meridian Capital proposal took me 3 weeks to complete. 47 pages. Patricia reviewed the legal terms. A financial consultant named Diane Toritz, 20 years of private equity experience, reviewed the financial framework. I rewrote the risk mitigation section twice. I was up past midnight on 4 separate occasions, the way I had been in the early years of the firm, in the way that was actually comfortable for me. Because I understood that thoroughness is the only shortcut that genuinely works. The proposal was sent to Sandra on the 6th of August. Davis had added 4 sentences to the executive summary and asked that his name appear as lead partner. I kept his name in the document. 4 sentences seemed an accurate reflection of 4 sentences worth of contribution. Sandra called me on the 17th of August at 9:22 in the morning. Meridian Capital would like to proceed. The engagement would begin October the 1st. Contract value, $1,350,000 over 36 months, 57% above our initial estimate because Sandra had expanded the scope after reading the proposal in full. She called my direct line, not the firm's main number. She said, "I've worked with a lot of consulting firms, Caroline, and very few people can put together a proposal that answers the questions I haven't asked yet. We're looking forward to working with you personally." I said thank you. I sat alone in my office with the door closed. I allowed myself exactly 1 moment of clean, uncomplicated satisfaction. Then I opened the calendar and began scheduling the October kickoff. Over the next 14 months, I executed the Meridian Capital engagement with the same quiet precision I had brought to everything in that firm for 9 years. Twice monthly office visits, quarterly board reports, working relationships with all 7 portfolio companies. Davis attended 2 client dinners at Sandra's invitation. He was charming at both. Sandra called me afterward each time to discuss the substantive matters. She never called Davis to debrief. During this same period, Patricia finalized the restructured operating agreement in March of 2017. The new agreement formally designated me as managing principal and majority owner with full operational authority over all contracts, client relationships, and strategic decisions. Davis was designated partner, client relations. He signed it in our dining room on a Sunday afternoon while Lily watched a cartoon in the next room. He looked up once and said, "This is just formalizing what's always been true." I said, Yes, that's exactly what it is. I had it notarized the following Tuesday. 2018. The year the firm crossed $5 million in annual revenue for the first time. I remember the exact moment I saw the year-end figure in our accounting software. 11:22 at night in December. Lily asleep down the hall. Davis at a holiday party I had declined. The number on the screen was $5,240,000. I sat with that number for a long while. I thought about March of 2008, $11,400. A blue spiral notebook. Patricia's office. I thought about Paul Whitmore's toast. I thought about 14. The number of times Davis had said "I" at a podium describing work that was mine. I thought about Lily at 6 months old, propped against a nursing pillow on the left side of my desk while I finished a client report at midnight, because we couldn't yet afford evening childcare, and the particular weight of a sleeping infant against the edge of your arm while your other hand types. I thought about all the rooms, all the decisions, all the accumulation of work in the quiet hours that had become this number on a screen. I did not celebrate. I closed the laptop. I walked down the hall and checked on my daughter. She was sleeping with one arm stretched above her head, her dark hair spread across the pillow. I stood in the doorway for a long moment, then I went to bed. 2020 through 2022 brought the challenges of a shifting consulting market, and the firm navigated them as it had always navigated difficulty. Because of the operational infrastructure I had spent 14 years building, we diversified our service portfolio in late 2020, adding a governance advisory stream that I had been developing as a concept since 2018. I hired 2 senior consultants, both women, one of whom told me in her interview that she had specifically sought out this firm because of a conversation she'd had with Angela Brewster at a healthcare industry conference. Angela said you were the most prepared person she'd ever worked with, she told me. I thanked her and hired her on the spot. Our annual revenue in 2022 was $7,100,000. Davis attended the team holiday dinner that year and gave a brief toast to our incredible growth. I watched faces around the table look at me while he spoke. The people who worked in that firm knew exactly where the growth came from. They had always known. September of 2023, Davis began planning the firm's 15th anniversary celebration, the Ridgemont Country Club. 250 guests, a live band, a speech. He was excited about the speech. I helped select the menu. I reviewed the guest list. I arranged the floral centerpieces, white orchid arrangements with dark green foliage. I confirmed the attendance of every major client, including Sandra Kowalski, Angela Brewster, 11 of Meridian Capital's 14 board members. In late August, I had a quiet 40-minute meeting with Patricia and asked her to prepare a specific set of documents. She asked what I expected to happen. I said I had been paying attention to Davis for 16 years, and I had a reasonable sense of what a podium and 200 applauding guests would invite him to do. I wanted to be prepared rather than surprised. She had the documents ready by September the 10th. I collected them on the 11th. I placed them in a manila folder. I placed the folder in my evening bag on the night of the event, beneath my phone and a lipstick in a shade called Quiet Rose. If you are still watching, I want to ask you something before we get to what happened next. How many times have you built something real and sat quietly while someone else received the applause for it? Drop your answer in the comments below. Not a summary. The actual moment. The specific room, the specific line, the specific face you watched while the credit passed right over your head. And if this is your first time on this channel, please subscribe right now. Because what happens in the next part of this story is the entire reason Revenge Chronicles exists. September the 14th, 7 minutes past 8 in the evening. Davis at the podium. 230 guests applauding a 22-minute speech about one man's vision. My daughter's warm breath against my ear carrying her father's message. I sat with my hands folded in my lap and the folder in my bag, and I waited for the applause to settle and for the event moderator to step away from the microphone. I stood up. I smoothed the front of my dress, navy blue silk crepe, chosen without any strategic intent, but which, in retrospect, was exactly right. serious, composed, and impossible to dismiss. I walked to the stage. The event moderator, a pleasant man named Robert Gaines, whom I had personally hired for the evening, was stepping back from the podium. I touched his arm and said, "I'd like to say a few words, if that's all right." Robert's eyes moved briefly to Davis across the stage. Davis saw me. His expression went through its sequence: surprise, then the quick recovery toward the amused and tolerant look he used for situations he assumed he could manage. Robert said, "Of course, Mrs. Brauber." "Hartwell," I said, "Ms. Ashworth, actually, and thank you." I stepped to the microphone. "Good evening," I said. My voice was level. "My name is Caroline Ashworth. I am the majority owner and managing principal of Hartwell Consulting Group." A small silence moved through the room. Sandra Kowalski at table 4 lifted her chin slightly. Angela Brewster at table 9 set down her wineglass with unhurried deliberateness. I have sat quietly for 16 years and allowed this company's history to be told in a way that was not accurate. I do not say that with anger. I say it because the people in this room deserve to understand exactly who they have been working with. Hartwell Consulting Group was incorporated on March 14, 2008. The Articles of Incorporation bear my name as the founding principal. The initial operating capital of $11,400 came from my personal savings account. The business plan, the market analysis, the financial projections, the initial legal structure, and the firm's website were all created by me in the 11 weeks prior to incorporation, while my husband was between jobs. Southwestern Medical Partners signed with this firm because of a 4-month relationship and a proposal that I'd built without assistance. Meridian Capital Partners signed a $1,050,000 engagement because of a 47-page proposal that I wrote. Every year-over-year revenue milestone this firm has achieved is documented, and the documentation exists. I reached into my evening bag. I removed the manila folder. I handed it to Robert, who stood behind me with the expression of a person watching something they will describe at dinner parties for years. These are copies of the founding documents, the operating agreement as most recently amended, and a summary of every primary business development milestone from 2008 through the present, each annotated with the name of the person responsible for originating the client relationship. I have prepared one copy for each of our primary client accounts. They will be distributed by my attorney at the conclusion of this evening. I looked out at the room. 230 faces, some pale, some wide-eyed, some, particularly the women at the tables, beginning to understand exactly what they were witnessing. Angela Brewster was looking at me with an expression I recognized because I had worn it myself in many rooms over many years. The expression of a person who has always suspected the truth and has only now seen it confirmed in front of witnesses. "I am not here to end this company," I said. "I built this company and I love this work. I intend to continue doing it for a very long time. I am here to introduce myself properly to the clients and partners who have trusted us and deserve to know the truth of what they have trusted. My name is Caroline Ashworth. I built Hartwell Consulting Group. It has been my privilege to do so. Thank you." I stepped back from the microphone. The room was almost entirely silent for 3 full seconds. Then Angela Brewster began to applaud. Measured, deliberate, quiet. The applause of a woman who has been waiting for a particular correction for a very long time. Sandra Kowalski joined her. A third person. A fourth. By the time the wave moved through half the room, it was genuine, and the half that was not clapping was very carefully not looking at Davis. Davis stood at the edge of the stage. His face had gone completely still. Not composed, still. The way a face goes when it has run out of things to perform, and the performance was all there ever was. The room did not return to being what it had been before that moment at the microphone. Something had permanently shifted in the air. People moved toward me during the rest of the evening. Sandra Kowalski came first, took both my hands and said simply, "I knew." Angela Brewster came second. She said, "I always wondered why your card said Director of Operations when you were the one who understood everything." Marcus Webb, now a senior consultant at a competing firm and present as a professional contact, found me near the bar at 9:15 and said, "I asked about the grandfather's money. Do you remember that morning?" I said I remembered. He said, "I'm sorry I didn't push harder." I told him it wasn't his responsibility to push. That was never his job. Several of Davis's golf partners offered careful handshakes and checked their watches. The exits filled earlier than the evening warranted. Davis found me near the cloakroom at 9:47. His performance of ease had completely dissolved. He spoke very quietly. "What did you just do?" I introduced myself. I said, "To the people who have been my clients for years. You humiliated me." I looked at him directly. I corrected the record. In front of the people who deserved to have it corrected. In front of 200 people. You told our 6-year-old daughter to tell me I was nobody. In front of the same 200 people's worth of effort that I spent building the company that paid for this evening. I thought it was appropriate that the same audience know who I actually am. He had no response to that. He reached for something. Some version of the easy confidence that had always been available to him, and it simply was not there. I picked up my evening bag. I collected Lily from the babysitter in the side room. I took her hand. She looked up and said, "Are we going home?" "Yes, sweetheart," I said. "We're going home." She fell asleep in her car seat before we reached the highway. I drove through the warm Arizona night with the windows slightly down and the radio very low, and I felt, instead of triumph or grief or relief, something I can only describe as spaciousness. Like a room that has been overcrowded for a very long time, and then the unnecessary furniture is finally carried out, and you can see, for the first time in years, the actual dimensions of the space you have been living in. In the weeks that followed, the shape of things arranged themselves with a logic that required nothing more from me. 3 of the firm's client relationships transitioned their primary contact to me formally and in writing. 2 smaller clients did not renew. Meridian Capital Partners renewed for an additional 24 months, the letter addressed to me personally. Davis came to my home office 11 days after the event. He sat in the chair across from my desk, a chair he had never sat in before. He said, "I want to fix this." I said, "The operating agreement is correctly structured. There's nothing to fix on paper." He said, "I mean between us." I let several seconds pass. "Davis, I am the majority owner of this business. That has always been true and will remain true. I intend to run it accordingly from this point forward. And I will not allow our daughter to be placed in the middle of what happens between us as adults. Those are the conditions I'm operating from." He looked at me for a long time. Then he said, "You planned this." "I prepared for it," I said. "There's a difference. I've been preparing since January of 2016 when you stood at a podium and said, 14 times about a company you didn't build." He left without a plan. He came back twice more in the following month. Each time he was reaching for a version of me who had something to negotiate away. That version had retired on the evening of September the 14th in front of 230 witnesses, and it was not coming back. What I have learned in the months since that evening is something I want to say carefully, because I think it matters more than anything else in this story. I am not interested in framing what happened as a victory. The victory narrative implies I was competing with someone, and I was not competing with Davis. I was working. I was always working. And the work was always its own evidence. What changed was simply that the evidence was finally presented to the people who had been receiving a distorted version of the story for years. That is not a win. That is a correction. And corrections are available to every person who is willing to do the quiet work of making sure the record is accurate. What I want to say to you is about the silence. I kept my silence for 16 years, and I told myself it was dignity. I told myself it was the high road. I told myself I didn't need credit because I knew what I had built and that knowing was enough. And some of that was true. The knowing sustained me through a great deal. But the silence was also permission. Every time I sat in a room and let a false story stand, I was giving that story permission to continue. Every time I swallowed the moment instead of naming it, I was telling everyone around me, including Davis, that the false version of events was acceptable. The silence was not protecting me. It was protecting the lie. I am not telling you to be loud. I am not telling you to make a scene or perform your grievance publicly or do exactly what I did in exactly the way I did it. What I am telling you is this: document everything. Understand exactly what belongs to you, legally and factually. Keep the record somewhere only you can access. And then find your moment, whether it is a dinner party or a boardroom or a quiet email or a private conversation, and speak plainly and without apology about what is true. You do not need to raise your voice. You do not need to perform anything. You only need the facts and the composure to present them. The facts are already enough. They have always been enough. To every woman watching this who has been the engine in a machine with someone else's name on the hood. To every woman who has been told, in 100 different ways, that the work she does is furniture and not architecture. I see you. Not because I am special or because I had some gift for strategy that you don't. I see you because I was you for a very long time, and I want you to know that the quiet preparation, the documentation, the patience, the deliberate and careful building of a position that cannot be disputed, it is available to you right now. It begins with a conversation with the right attorney. It begins with a look at the documents that govern what you have built. It begins tonight, not with drama, with documentation. Here is the question I want to leave you with, and I mean it genuinely. Have you ever built something in silence that someone else took credit for? Not a one-word answer. The actual story, the specific room, the specific moment, the specific thing that was said while you sat still and swallowed it. Leave it in the comments below, because these stories, told out loud, are the ones that can no longer be erased. And you have been quiet long enough. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for staying with this story from beginning to end. If you have ever felt like Caroline in any room, in any relationship, in any chapter of your life, this channel was built for you. Every woman's story deserves to be heard. Ours is a small team of 3 who believe that deeply, and with the help of AI narration and storytelling, we bring a new story to life every single day, right here on Revenge Chronicles. Because the quietest women deliver the loudest outcomes, and we intend to make sure those outcomes are on record, share this video with one woman who needs to hear it today. Subscribe so you never miss what comes next. And come back tomorrow, because the next story is already waiting, and I promise it will make you put everything else down and simply listen. We are so glad you are here. Thank you. We will see you tomorrow.